Welcome to the Manufacturing Shakeup. We're your hosts, Ellen Feldman-Ornato
and Jenny Drescher. We're talking with dynamic women from across the manufacturing scene in Connecticut. Hey out there in listener land, I have a very important psychic message to deliver to you right now. Here it comes.
Ooh.
Yep, that was it. Wait, you didn't understand that? You didn't understand that psychic message that we just gave you? You know why? Because we are not mind readers, friends, are we? Huh, well, welcome to today's Shakeup. Today's Shakeup guest is Lena Geliga from Hygrade Precision. Lena, when we did your pre-interview, you said, well, people are not mind readers. We need to learn to recognize what we need and to ask for it. Yes. And boy, did that make our little hearts sing. Tell us how you learned that. Just jump right in. Tell us, how'd you figure it out?
Failing a lot. Probably would be the first one. Is you tried something and it didn't work and you realize you need to be more clear. It's just like anything else. And manufacturing will teach you those things. You will learn stuff that maybe you haven't done before, accepting those, admitting when you maybe don't know as much and being able to speak up. It's even those levels of saying, I don't know this. How can I do it better? Once you learn how you work better, you can then request those things and say, I do this well, let me do this. I would like this. And people recognize that along the way as well.
I love that. I love that because I think it's a human nature thing that very often we get into this headspace, this heart space, where we make a lot of assumptions about what we think is obvious or what we think other people understand automatically. And as a best practice, interrupting those assumptions, which is what I hear you describing, really just strikes me as very important. So paying attention when you failed was part of how you learned. Oh, I screwed that up. I should have asked more clearly about what I want. I could have articulated it instead of expecting somebody else to be a mind reader. I feel like this could be a theme for this entire episode. Is about the power of backing down from thinking we're mind readers.
Yes. It's also not just what you need. It's reiterating to the person describing your request what you requested. How often are you working with someone and you thought you were clear and what they repeated back to you was not that? So it's also how much you can communicate that with the people that you're working with.
That is such an essential step, especially as you start moving into the place where you're managing other people. Right. How often have you been in a position where you asked somebody to do something and you thought you were completely clear and they come back with something completely different than what it was you were thinking they were going to come back to you with?
Every day.
Every day, right? And so we're constantly having to notice, where am I not being clear and how specific do I need to be with this person? And then how do I check in with them to be sure that what I asked them to do is actually what they heard?
Yes. And it's a lot of self-awareness sometimes too, which takes sometimes a lot of people to learn. And I find not everyone's like this, but I find that I notice it in my personal life too. Did I talk to my mother correctly? And I was trying to reiterate something to her, right? And I wanted to hear it back and it wasn't understood. And then I'm left disappointed in my own personal relationships, which sometimes you get to monitor a little more, will help you also understand how you react to other people. Because in the end of the day, you're working with other humans, you're working with other people who can misunderstand or understand things differently, and have a different general knowledge base than you do. So something that might seem normal or regular to you may not be for the next person.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. I want to dial back into some of what we learned about your early career. It seems that you've done a lot of yes and figure it out, say yes and figure it out in your career, including when you first started working in manufacturing. So tell us that story. What happened with you just having to say yes to the situation and figure it out?
It's happened from the start. I actually started in manufacturing in the front desk position. I was answering the phones. I was checking people in. I was handling clerical work, filing employee documents, customer documents, and learning. So as something happened, such as a PO, a purchase order came in from a customer, maybe I noticed something off. You're just raising my hand and asking more questions about it, where other people may have been like, well, this is not my responsibility to look at. I'm going to push it forward. Sometimes it's good to understand why you need that incoming information. Maybe you need that. Maybe it's a requirement. We develop systems in manufacturing to help us detect those things, but it's very much so dictated on how effectively that person can execute it, how effectively they get the answers from the customers or the people that they're working with.
I feel like you're also tuning into this idea that I have heard from some of our clients, our Boulder Company clients, about how the frontline folks, sometimes one of the most tricky transitions in a manufacturing space is actually from that newcomer level into understanding what is the environment about? How do things work? Why do we do this thing? Why do we do that thing? What, how does tab A go into slot B and why? And so the idea of servicing these assumptions and asking great questions is critical for bringing on new folks. It's critical for being able to expand how you get things done. I'm curious, how did working retail teach you to do this?
So I started at Lowe's Home Improvement, actually the one in Newington, Connecticut. That's the one I
Big
started.
store. That's a big flagship store. It's an amazing store over there.
Big store, and you start to learn, and you get put in usually a department, whether it be if you're going to be a cashier or if you're going to be on the floor in a specific department, and you do trainings to that. That's how they used to set them up, and they would have electrical department trainings, inside garden trainings, cashier trainings. However, it's very heavily suggested that you cross-train and learn because you're on the floor. A customer's going to come in and ask you, can you help me with this? And you need to be able to maybe walk them to the person who is the specialist of that. You need to be able to ask them the right questions so you take them to the right place. And I feel that that was a big part of me learning to ask better questions in other facilities, other industries. I had to deal with all different types of customers coming into the store and different terminologies for stuff, different things, different languages. And you have to be able to pinpoint something to maybe get them help faster and get them to the right section. And Lowe's used to do a good part of that. One of my first things to do in my new employee orientation was a scavenger hunt. And I had to walk on the floor and find things that a regular customer would look for, trash bags, tape, and see if I found people along the way that stopped and had them come look for me. So if they asked for the same thing I was looking for, help them, even if you didn't know. And that alone shows you how the interaction with people gets you to the end place you need to be.
And how did what you learned in retail roll forward into polymer precision? Was that your next step?
Actually, it was B&B Manufacturing, which was DRT Aerospace Company, was purchased. And I started to do that in Winstead. I was coming from New Britain, Connecticut, driving all the way to Winstead. And I had to learn that. They did mainly aerospace parts. So it was a big learning curve from Lowe's retail to aerospace. However, getting that question and going to the sales guy, hey, I got a new purchase order in from a customer. I feel it was missing information that I need to enter. Can you get that for me? Can you show me? Instead of always just asking someone to do it or leave the pile in their area, it's, can you show me where I can see this going forward or where I can request it so that I can better help get this thing going forward so that there's no stops in our process and our customer is not delayed. When you're in retail, you don't have that opportunity sometimes to walk away from the customer, right? So you need to find that answer.
So there's I think it's worth noticing that there's an immediacy to a lot of things that go on in retail. And that's been something that you've pulled through into your manufacturing career. And so friends out there in listener land, if you have a teenager or a young 20-something who may be working retail and they're not sure about whether or not they're going anywhere, because we know retail is a difficult and trying space, even if you're working for a really great company like Lowe's, who is known for how well they treat their people, it's still, retail is tough. but being able to pull some of those skills forward strikes me as incredibly important. So make a note out there, friends. I want to ask about boundaries. And you talked a little bit in our interview before about it's knowing when to jump in versus when to say no. And how do you manage that? What do you do that helps you to tell the difference between when you need to jump in and help and do, like be the tasker, be in the doing role, as opposed to backing down and letting somebody else learn or try, or letting the situation unfold organically? How do you tell the difference between those two things?
You don't always tell the difference. And that's actually the hard part. And I think I mentioned that when we spoke before, is you learn that. Because the problem with saying yes and doing things is you end up stretching yourself out thin when you're always helping people. And sometimes you may help them before you've helped yourself. And it's learning that balance. Yes, I can help you, but I need to finish this task first. Or, yes, I can help you. Could you help me finish this task so I can better help you? There's the boundary differences that sometimes don't get laid right away when you're always saying yes and you go to help someone and they always expect you to be there. So it's a matter of taking the time to actually listen to the person's request or the request from whomever, wherever it's coming from, so that you can then decide, I can help this quick. Maybe this person can help otherwise, or is there something else I need to do?
You just spoke heresy. You realize that, right? You just spoke heresy. Heresy is happening on the shakeup, my friends.
No.
Right? Hold on. Take time to reflect and check in. We don't do that in manufacturing. We just go and we do.
And I don't mean days, right? It's not days. Though sometimes you need that time, that 30 minutes to review the information and then decide better and not just brush people off, because then that's also an issue. And there may be times where you get put in that situation where you're deciding, I need to maybe push this off. I need to address this right away. But if you don't take the time, you will make more mistakes later that saturate your time to not allow you to make those things. And that's the hard lessons that you learn when you pick the wrong path and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that more. And now I know going forward. And then you obviously need to have other people that you can teach your knowledge to so that you can have someone to push it off to, which is a different path as well.
So one of the things that I noticed when I was looking over the notes about you is that you seem to be, wherever you go, you bring it all towards you, right? That you have this way of being that says, I want to learn more. I want to do more. I want to expand my knowledge into other parts of the company. Has that ever, like that joy of learning and the desire to be relevant within the space, has it ever worked against you when it comes to compensation? Like, have you found yourself in a place where what you're doing far exceeds the amount that you're being paid? And if yes, how did you close that gap in terms of pay?
Again, you have to see it, right? You have to acknowledge that you do that work. One of the things that I've tried to implement now is you also need to pay attention to what you're doing. So if in the beginning of the year you set yourself goals and maybe you fell off those goals throughout the year, you should realign with them at some point so that you know how far you were off and you know how well you are working, so that you can say, no, I can do that. I've done it before. And it's for your own sanity. It's not proof, and that you have these receipts and this buildup of stuff that prove your value. It's so that you can pivot and say, no, I've done that before. I know that if you follow these, I get this. And so again, that self-awareness that you need to understand yourself. And you only do that by taking the chances to maybe make a mistake or maybe do something well, and the reapproach that you take to do it better the next time. Now, in reviewing some goals you set from before and after, you then now have a value. You improve something. You did do this. And you can say, I make your company better. Or I make this job better. And I deserve this. Now it backfires where you end up doing that and you're like, listen, in the beginning of the year, I took on all these extra things. I'm still not compensated. Um, and then you can address it and you may need to leave the position you're in and saying the no. I will not accept that as an answer. And that's hard.
Mm.
That's
Have you
very
had that situation?
And I have. And I have
Mhm.
left. And you don't want to change. Most people are comfortable and you want to learn more and you want to grow and you feel purpose in what you're learning. But it doesn't mean it's lost.
Mhm.
And if you've done enough and you're not getting compensation, you're not getting recognized, or you're unhappy, because it's really, are you going to be sustainable? Are you going to be at your max performance if you're not happy? And if the answer is no, you need to change that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your experience is offering us and our listeners an idea, which is that there's a critical role of understanding and developing your own sense of what you bring to the table, your own worthiness, your own value, and that can support you in working against your own assumptions about a situation. Because I remember years ago the experiences that I had before I went into manufacturing. I remember in retail and distribution and in restaurants, my take on it was always, well, they told me that's what the rate of pay is, so that's what I'm going to take. And I think that happens to a lot of young people. Well, it's just that's what they said the rate of pay is, because we grow into understanding that that's not true. And the critical piece is to really, what I'm hearing you did was you developed your sense of worth. You started to articulate and identify what are the key pieces that I'm bringing to the table that help me to say, I'm not going to just take your answer that you're telling me that's what the job is worth. I mean, if I could abolish a few words from the business vernacular, man, would it be some of those? That's what the job is worth. Oh, for crying out loud.
And again, you need to be willing to push back and say no.
Yeah.
And it is the yes mentality that kind of sets you up to understand your boundaries. So you're always going to have that transition period where it's a little painful sometimes, but you
Mhm.
have to learn that so that you can move forward. And that's exactly, we spoke before, and that's what happened to me. As much as I appreciate it and I learned, and I was there for a decade pretty much of my first full-time job kind of out of school. And, I appreciated it and I did it. But when I got hired with other guys, and I was the only female hired, and I got hired less because my physical aptitudes wasn't going to be the same as my male counterparts. I wasn't going to learn how to drive power equipment. I wasn't going to be able to live above 50 pounds. So they gave that a dollar value less than what my male counterparts were making. And so the yes and in me was, well, I am going to get power equipment certified. I do lift over 50 pounds. I actively do it. I became a trainer of power equipment and I earned my value. And it doesn't always work that way. So you may do all of that and end up in a situation where you say, I did all of that and I train now and I do this. And someone tells you, well, it's not worth it. And then you have to say, well, then I'm leaving.
Hmm. Yeah, that pivot point somehow is sometimes is really painful to get to. I
Yes.
thought I made my case, and
Yes.
I'm still not getting the result that I want.
Mhm.
So they're giving you the answer right there.
Yep. And then you have to be willing to take that. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes you need your job and you
Yeah,
can't. And that's not always
exactly.
the answer.
Yeah.
Right. So at the time, it's then figuring out how you're going to learn and change that to a different opportunity. Right.
Mhm.
This may not be what I can leave now. And I think most people will tell you that. And, there are books and other, TED Talks or anything that you can watch that will show you better habits or ways to talk to people, but you need to understand what you're going to ask for. And you need to
Mhm.
understand what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So this has been a great conversation. Friends out there in listener land, here are your shakeup factors for today's episode. One is we want to yes and, but let's stop and check those priorities. Seems like a really good best practice to be able to say, yeah, and I'm going to include myself in the consideration around this task when I'm trying to perform as an excellent team member so that I don't help you with the expense of my own responsibilities or my own well-being. Shakeup factor number 2 is really taking time to reflect. We like to think of this at the shakeup as slowing down to speed up, so that we can really have perspective on what it is that we're trying to do. Number 3, I heard, is really understanding, really hanging out in a conversation with yourself about what do I bring to the table? How much worthiness and value am I giving myself to be able to really say, you know what, I'm worth it, as the old commercial went. So knowing who you are, sinking your teeth into your core value. And then to round it off, I heard a number 4, which is the more you understand your value. Number 4, fourth shakeup factor is be willing to say no. So we're going to say yes and no. Yes and no. Yes to more fun and more self-worth in the workplace, because work shouldn't hurt. And no to any more, because darn, we're out of time. Lena Geliga, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had so much fun talking with you.
The Manufacturing Shakeup is sponsored by the Connecticut Office of Manufacturing, produced by Maselli Productions and Gale Communications, and hosted by the Boulder Company.